Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rosemarie Pena, and as your host and on behalf of the Black German Heritage and Research Association, it is indeed my pleasure to welcome you and to thank you for joining us. We appreciate your interest and trust you'll be very glad that you came. Today's event, the second in our All Black Lives Matter series entitled Unpacking Racism in Germany and the US, Ways to Promote Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity in Education, features the award-winning German journalist, podcaster, and author, Alex Hasters. This timely and important exchange is produced in cooperation with the American Association of Teachers of German, the German Consulate General, New York, the German International School, New York, and the German School, Brooklyn. We are immensely grateful for the generosity of the German Consulate General, New York, that has made this exciting event possible for us. Before we proceed further, however, I must first take a moment to acknowledge the Lenni Lenape, the indigenous people who still occupy the space that we call Southern New Jersey. Both my residence from where I speak and Rutgers University-Camden, my institutional home, sit on land connected to their rich history. I and the Rutgers community understand and acknowledge our shared responsibility to communicate the ways that our campus and its surrounding community are implicated in the lives of Native peoples. For those of you who may be yet unfamiliar with our organization, since 2011, the BGHRA documents Black German life and history, and we celebrate our diaspora community's literary and cultural production as expressed in Europe, Africa, the Americas, the Caribbean, and elsewhere around the world. Please visit our website at bghra.org and follow us on social media to learn more about us. The inaugural event in our All Black Lives Matter series, announcing our partnership with Africana Studies at Rutgers-Camden, was held during this year's Black History Month. The program, entitled Blackness in Germany and the Afro-European Diaspora, featured Dr. Tiffany Florville, who discussed her recent book, Mobilizing Black Germany, Afro-German Women, and the Making of a Transnational Movement. In the case that you missed it, the talk was recorded and is archived on our YouTube channel with videos from our prior conference keynotes and panel discussions. Today's talk will also be shortly available for your review, and we hope that you will share it with your colleagues, students, and friends. Now, without further ado, our program will proceed as follows. After welcoming remarks from my co-host, Dr. Keith Green, the Executive Director of the American Association of Teachers of German, Dr. Mike Shaughnessy, and the Honorable Consul General, David Gill, I will return briefly to introduce you to our special guest, Alice Hasters, and our moderator, Kavina King. Keith?
Thank you, Rose. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Keith Green. As Dr. Pena noted, I'm the Director of Africana Studies here at Rutgers University in Camden. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the second installment of our All Black Lives Matter speaker series, a series dedicated to illuminating Black experiences, beauty, and the fight for equality, especially in the European context. Africana Studies is a field that has long recognized the presence and contributions of people of African descent in South America, the Caribbean, and United States. It has rightly traced that presence to the tragedy of the transatlantic slave trade, the largest forced migration in human history, which took some 12.5 million African people from their original homelands. However, when we think about Black presences in Europe, other stories of migration and cross-cultural contact must be accounted for, such as royal service, colonization, and war. The specific geopolitical realities of modern Europe also impact how we read diasporic Blackness. Indeed, the phrase Black Lives Matter takes on different meanings and contexts outside of the US. This series seeks to highlight the continuities and ruptures between calls for racial justice by people of African descent throughout the world, with a particular focus on the neglected perspectives of Blacks in Europe and of European descent. So many people contributed to this program, some of whom will not appear on your screens this afternoon. So before we go any further, I want to take a brief moment to acknowledge their many contributions. First, I'd like to thank our partners at the AATG, in particular, Director Dr. Mike Shaughnessy, the German Consulate in New York, in particular, Mrs. Yasmin Pamuk, Head of Cultural Affairs, and of course, Consul General David Gill. Our moderator, doctoral student Kavina King, and of course, our special guest, journalist Alice Hasters. If the conversation we had yesterday was any indication of what will happen today, we are all in for a treat. I'd also like to acknowledge Dee Johnzak, who is the Secretary for Africana Studies, who keeps the program running like a well-oiled machine. She's at the heart of every program, and I'm eternally grateful for her partnership. Julie Ronsinski and Kate Blair of the Office of Web Design have been steadfast supporters of Africana Studies and the BGHRA. The All Black Lives Matter logo and flyer that many of you received are their designs. From the events office, Brianna Fleming and David Tran provided and still provide much needed technical support with planning and technology, without which this program would not be possible. And of course, I would like to acknowledge my ever faithful collaborator in all things Black German, Dr. Rose Pena. She was the first person I heard utter the phrase, "All Black Lives Matter." And that conversation was the seed of the flower that became this speaker series. Thank you, Rose. At this time, I'd like to turn the program back over to Dr. Pena.
Keith, thank you so much for your wonderful remarks. And now I will turn the next phase over, and we will ask Mike Shaughnessy and Consul General Gill if they would like to offer their remarks. Mike?
Thank you, Rosemary. I appreciate it. On behalf of the AATG, thank you for coming to this event today. I'm Mike Shaughnessy, the Executive Director. I'm very grateful for all the people who made this happen, including the Consulate General of New York, Mr. David Gill, the German School of Brooklyn, the German International School of New York, and a special thanks to the partners we have with the BGHRA and Rutgers-Camden for their leadership and immense technical infrastructure. Thank you, Dr. Keith Green, Kavina King, and Dr. Pena for being here today and providing leadership for this event. The AATG looks really forward to working closely in the future with the BGHRA on events and programs, and appreciates all the work they did today to make this event possible. Thanks to Alice Hasters for joining us, and a reminder to all that you can listen to her book in German on Spotify. Danke. I'll pass it over to Consul Gill.
Guten Tag, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, liebe Alice Hasters, Rosemary Pena, dear Dr. Keith Green and Mike Shaughnessy, liebe Kavina King, dear partners and friends of the German Consulate General in New York, liebe Schülerinnen und Schüler, Lehrerinnen und Lehrer der German International School New York, der German School Brooklyn, from other German schools all over the country, ladies and gentlemen. George Floyd's brutal and horrific killing almost a year ago caused a tremendous public reaction, which probably was long overdue. Across the world and in the middle of a pandemic, hundreds of thousands of people, more young than old, of all colors and many nations took to the streets in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. I remember the peaceful protesters and the courage and determination of those who marched through our neighborhoods, to denounce racism and police brutality. They gave me hope and gave hope to all of those people around the world who suffer from discrimination and violence. Yes, racism was the cause of their anger. But while we witnessed it in the case of George Floyd in its most brutal form, it is also reality in the everyday lives of many among us. It is important that we carefully listen to people like Alice Hasters in order to realize that racism begins much earlier than with obvious exclusion, racist slurs, beatings and attacks, or even killings. In addition, on both sides of the Atlantic, we see a resurgence of white supremacist movements and racially motivated violence. Racist thinking and acting are much more common than you would expect. To tackle this challenge, we need a societal atmosphere of openness and willingness to change. Freedom and democracy, the universal core values and principles both our countries share, are actually helpful prerequisites to make significant changes. Meaningful democracies can only thrive with people who rise to the challenge, who nurture and protect civil rights and the principles of freedom, justice, and equity for all. However, too many times we have seen the fragility of democracy and its institutions. This is why integrity and civil courage matter. The Black Lives Matter movement, with its peaceful and creative forms of protest, is such an example. In many ways, Black Lives Matter echoes the ongoing debates over issues of migration and refugees in Europe. Xenophobia is common in all European countries, and we have seen the rise of right-wing populist parties and politicians who make use of racist and xenophobic rhetoric to grow their voter base. But the past year has also demonstrated that Black Lives Matter mobilizes people beyond the Black communities it represents across the United States. It has become a transatlantic, a European, a global movement. Black Lives Matter forces us to reckon with ongoing daily racism, discrimination, and injustice in our own societies. Let me assure you, the German government is aware how crucial this acknowledgement as well as the fight against racism in all its forms and disguises in Germany is. And we will mobilize against racism and to secure that populist parties, movements, and politicians will not be successful in amplifying racism. Dear guests, today's transatlantic conversation with German author and journalist Alice Hasters, Dr. Keith Green, and Kevina King will help us to find orientation. In her book, What White People Don't Want to Hear About Racism, but Should Know, Ms. Hasters deals with the problem of overlooked and sometimes invisible forms of racism. Based on personal experience, Ms. Hasters highlights 5 areas that racism touches: everyday life, body, love, family, as well as our main topic today, education. Hasters' observations and unpleasant truths sometimes are hard to be confronted with. There is no doubt, however, that this transatlantic conversation is a timely one and gives us the chance to listen, to reflect, and to learn from one another. A commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity in education is crucial for education institutions and their responsibility for doing their part in dismantling racism and other systems of oppression. I'm all the more delighted that among our audience today are teachers, students, and parents of several German schools in the United States and even beyond. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those people in the organization who make this event possible. The Black German Heritage and Research Association, Rutgers Africana Studies, the American Association of Teachers of German, and last but not least, the German International School, New York, and German School, Brooklyn. Allow me to end my welcome address with a quote from Michelle Obama in a statement following the harrowing death of George Floyd. And I quote, "Race and racism is a reality that so many of us grow up learning to just deal with. But if we ever hope to move past it, it can't just be on people of color to deal with it. It's up to all of us, black, white, everyone, no matter how well-meaning we think we might be, to do the honest, uncomfortable work of rooting it out. It starts with self-examination and listening to those whose lives are different from our own. It ends with justice, compassion, and empathy that manifests in our lives and on our streets." End of quote. I'm looking forward to an inspiring and interesting transatlantic conversation.
Thank you, Consul Gil, for your important and moving comments. And now, as promised, I'll introduce you to our featured speaker and moderator, and then turn our event over to them. Alice Hasters is a German journalist, author, and podcaster. Hasters' writing and journalism focuses on Afro-German identity, racism, feminism, and intersectionality. Her debut book, Was weiße Menschen nicht über Rassismus hören wollen, aber wissen sollten, What White People Don't Want to Hear About Racism But Should Know Anyway, discusses her experience with everyday racism and microaggressions in Germany, and the common misconception and myth that racism is constricted to the far right of German society. The audiobook is available on Spotify. Hasters' book reached number 5 on Der Spiegel's annual bestseller list of paperback nonfiction books. In 2020, she was named Culture Journalist of the Year by Medium magazine. Hasters is not only a host on the Feuer und Brot podcast, which discusses politics and pop culture, she also hosts 100 Stories mit Alice Hasters, which broadcasts on Deutschlandfunk Nova. Kavina King is a PhD student in German and Scandinavian Studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where she earned her master's degree with a focus on Black German history, Black German music, and the Black diaspora. She is currently working on her dissertation entitled Black German Resistance in the 21st Century, which examines Black German radical thought and artistic expression in digital media. Her chapter, Black POC and Migrant Lives Should Matter, Racial Profiling, Police Brutality, and Whiteness in Germany, and the 2018 volume, Rethinking German Black Studies, edited by Tiffany Florville and Vanessa Plumley, focuses on local struggles against racial profiling in Berlin since 2001. As the UMass DEFA Films Library's project assistant, Kavina curated the virtual film series, Black Lives in Germany, Resistance, Art, and Hope, which ran from October 20 to April 21st. And now, Kavina, I'll turn it to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me to be a moderator. It is an honor, especially because I just found out that it is Ella's first premiere event in the US, and that I get to moderate it is, such an honor. So thank you so much for having me. Alice welcome. I might switch back and forth between calling you Alice and Ellis. It just depends on how the bilingual mind works, right? So I hope you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the great introduction. I'm really looking forward to this event and to the conversation with you, Karina. Yeah, so thank you so much. I'm really excited because, as you said, it's the first time for me to have an event for a US audience. So
yeah, and we're very glad to have you. Your book is so timely. You know, it was published in 2019, but last year, during everything that was going on, you also released it as an audiobook on Spotify. And it's the first time that I've listened to an audiobook on Spotify, but it was really nice because, you know, the 6.5 hours or so are divided into 240 songs almost.
yeah, they're little clips.
Yeah, little clips, and you can like different ones that you don't want to go back to and like re-listen to, and it's a really nice way to listen to an audiobook, I feel. And you did such a great job narrating it. I felt I was right there sipping a cup of tea with you, maybe some wine, and you were telling me about your life story. Like, it really hit on a different level because it was your voice telling your life story. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. I'm so happy and glad to hear that. It was actually fun recording, and a lot of people told me who read the book before and then listened to it that they were actually surprised how they imagined my voice when they read it to be like more like forceful or kind of calm, and that when I'm reading it. Yeah, so that was interesting. So I'm glad.
I like that. That is really interesting because there were moments in the book where I was just astonished by your calmness, but also like there was a sense of I didn't want to touch upon this until later, but there was a sense of like really like communicating care and love in really like delicate moments when you're talking about your loved ones and your experience with being affected by their racism as well. So the way that you then read those moments like were really, really great. And because of the title, I think I was hesitant at first because I thought that your sole audience was a white German audience, and I was just surprised and proven wrong like over and over again, because there were just so many moments where I felt not only could I relate and have been through that exact same moment, and it's like, amen, sister, to like so many moments, but I think they're also, because of your particular experience, also something that Black women and POC women can really learn and experience anew in a way because of your experience. So
a quick word with the title, because I get this feedback a lot, which is unfortunate. I think the title is actually really is kind of controversial, or it has sparked a little controversy since its release of the book, because a lot of white people in Germany seem to be appalled, since calling white people white in Germany is not as established. It's getting there, but 2019, when it came out, it felt really strange to a lot of white people to be called white and in a title and so bluntly, and then to say you don't want to what white people don't want to know about racism. So they felt a lot of people felt offended, and other people who weren't white felt excluded, rightfully so, because it addresses white people. But when I was writing it, I didn't think about the title when I was writing it. So I never really thought of writing only for white people. I don't even know how that works, actually. So because I don't know how to, I was just speaking my mind and was presenting my research. And since I'm a Black woman, I speak from a Black female point of view. So yeah, so I'm glad that you could connect with it. And yeah, so it's not only for white people, that's true.
Right, yeah, yeah. You know, and I think some of the ways that I think I was able to connect to it is because you weave your personal stories and things that happen to you and family members and things that you see in society, also with the history of racist thought and racist systems, right? It's such a huge undertaking, but there are parts in the book where, for example, there's so many topics that do this as well, but there are parts in the book where you talk about connecting body shaming, and some parts of your books are called muscle, poo-poo. It was very sweet and charming. And you connect that to the story of Sarah Bartman. You connect the discussion about the terminology of whiteness to Friedrich Blumenbach and the term of Caucasians. You pull all these points in history into weave it into your story, and I find that just super convincing. Towards the end, in the chapter Liebe, love, I believe it was in that chapter, there is sort of a letter that you write to the white boyfriend who is now in his first relationship with a Black woman. Yes. And you read this letter in such a loving way, but also in a cautionary way, where you really, I think you did such a great job explaining how racism affects, obviously also the Black woman in that relationship, but then also how, with time and time, that white partner will see things happening that will make him understand a little bit further, like why he needs to, bring in a sense of proactive, a stance on anti-Black racism, right? Yeah. And I like that it's not just a letter for the white boyfriends. It's also a letter for the Black woman who might for the first time have a white boyfriend. And I almost think couples counseling and therapy sessions could use this letter to mediate the problems that eventually will always arise, especially in Germany, right? So talk a little bit about the format of the book, why you wanted it that way. Can you talk a little bit out of which moment the book arose as well, and
Sure. Yeah. So the book. There's always some people have a very great origin story with how they got the idea to write the book, but I don't really have that one moment where this book was entering my mind. I feel like it came really slowly. I don't even know when I started to think and write about race. Like I've done it all my life, but privately. And then there was this moment, the last election, Bundestagswahl, that was in 2017. And that was the first time where the right-wing party AfD was entering the Bundestag. And I was working at as a journalist at this news station called Tagesschau. It's like the news for in Germany. Comes on every day at 8. And I had to go to work that day. It was a Sunday, and I was feeling really weird because I cast my ballot. I felt kind of nervous, and I felt like something is changing now. I can't pretend as though this is just another election, you know, some things are going to change, because this is really different. It feels different, and it feels threatening to me that there's now a right-wing party in the Bundestag, which will have power to to have a say, and there are also people who are electing these who are voting for them, right? So this is when I started writing about how I felt, and from that on I was writing columns on a blog, but just on the side and not paid, just for me. And from that I was asked to write a book. So and my first answer was yes, I'd love to write a book. And then on second thought, I really had to take a step back and really think about it. What do I want to write? What do I want to say? And what can I say? Because I'm a journalist, so I do research, and my job is to communicate complicated things in a way that people understand them. But I'm not a scholar or something. So I was just like, okay, how can I do this? And this is why I chose this subjective, impersonal kind of storytelling, to because I felt like this is something that I know how to do. I know how to tell stories that way from my from being a journalist. I just know how to write a story and to make people understand why the story is actually important. So this is how I tried to write this book, because my thinking was, now that, because with the AfD, with the right-wing party entering the parliaments in Germany, not only the Bundestag, but in different states as well, people were always saying ideas of the right has entered the middle of in the middle of society. So it's like, okay, so I actually have to find out or address why so-called everyday people who are not radicals, right? Why are they open to these ideas? And why are radical racist ideas able to take over and flourish in this society? So this is why I was tackling these invisible forms of racism, because I think a lot of people, most people I would say, would think of themselves as though that they are not racist, and racism is something that is not in their lives. Like, they know it exists, there's racism, but there are no racists. Like, nobody feels as though it's them who has any responsibility or partakes in this climate of societal climate. So I wanted to change that. I wanted to point out where it actually is in their life by showing them how my life is shaped by racism. Because of course, when people ask, can I touch your hair? Or they want to ask me, where are you from? It doesn't seem as though that is really harmful at first. People would say, yeah, what's the big deal? Like, I don't know, this is not like, that might be rude, but it's not really bad. But when you see where does this idea really come from? When you explore, where does this idea come from that you can touch Black people's hair and you think it's funny or strange or something? Where did you get that idea? And then you go back in history and you see what happened to Black people and how they were treated, how they had to shave off their hair, how hair was a sign of societal cultural standing, and how this was erased. Or how Black people were put in zoos in the early 20th century, and people were able to look at them and touch them. Then this whole "can I touch your hair" kind of feels different. So this is what I wanted to point out with that book. So that these interaction that seem as though they are nothing, they have they're continuity of a very brutal history of enslavement and colonization. And yeah, that people should reflect more on where did they get this idea from? Where did they learn to see Black people that way? And where did I learn to see myself that way, right? And it doesn't stop at, you mentioned the letter that I write to my white boyfriend, which is actually inspired by a video from an US American YouTuber called Akila Obviously. She made a skit like years ago, and it's called "Hi, I'm your first Black girlfriend," and it's just really short. But I liked how she addressed this white boyfriend that you don't see, like she talks on the camera. So I took this idea and wrote a letter, which is not as funny, it's more serious. But I like this is where I got my inspiration from. And and I wanted to point out that racism is also an issue, even if you have the most loving relationship, like it's an issue between my white family members, between my white family members and me. It is an issue between my white friends and me. It is an issue between my white boyfriend and me, even though I love these people dearly. Like, love doesn't erase racism. And I think this is also this romanticized idea that I wanted to tackle, because I thought when I can address racism in these relationships, people will realize that it's not a lot of times, I feel like when we address race, white people react as though you do that to push them away. You do that because you hate them and you are mean or something. This is the concept of white fragility, right? That a lot of white people react very as though you offended them, even though you talk about something that offended you. This is why I addressed my boyfriend, to actually make clear that even though I love my boyfriend, there's still things that we have to work through. And yeah, I also heard that this letter saved and broke up several relationships. So yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you then thank you for that letter. I already kurze Zwischenfrage, the question between, I already saw the question of whether or not you're planning on translating this book or publishing it in translation in English. Is that already in the works? Will there be another audiobook in English?
I would love to. I'd love to, but it's not that easy because you actually need an offer, an international offer. Like somebody needs to publish this book. Somebody has to, as soon as if there is a publisher, an international publisher who's interested in publishing this book in English, I am happy to translate it. But since there's, there's no, it's not really, that is why it hasn't been translated, since I don't know if that's a lack of offers or if the German publishers just don't connect well with the publishers who were interested. I don't know, but I've asked several times my publisher if there's any, because I get private requests if it's translated, if I can translate it in English a lot of times, but it needs to go this official route since, and I'm fingers crossed that it will happen someday, because I would love to have an English version of it, especially because I want my family in the US to be able to read it as well, right? Because they're in it. They can't read it.
Right.
So.
Right. Oh, I'm sure after today, there'll be lots of interest. There's some,
somebody knows a publisher
in the audience who have contacts with publishing houses. I know you're there. I think it would be so important to translate this book because it really, for so many reasons, but also because it keeps going back also to education and to school as a site of racism, of experiences with racism that make Black students fear going to school. You talked about studying sport and not really being interested, but starting sports, because of some of the internal, racist thinking that we all, sort of take in. You also talk about journalism school and elitism and racism and elitism. And over again. And also your sister's experience. School as well, your mother's experience in Germany as a Black woman, your experience in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia at Central High School, and you made different experiences in both of those school systems. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and what, especially in the German context? I'm very much aware that these things are still happening, and colonialism is still not taught, and all of those things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I think in the US there's there's already a lot of terminology around how the school plays an active part in the upkeeping of systemic racism. You have terms like the school to prison pipeline, and how certain dynamics, or you have data and studies on how Black kids get more detention, and how this detention, this increased detention, places a disadvantage on them in their how their school education is going and stuff, and a lot of things along that line. In Germany, there is not a lot of data on how racism affects people in school. There are several like hints, but since there are different reasons why that is, we still don't really, there's a lot of data missing and stuff to actually make these studies, but what is really clear is that school in Germany, of course, also plays a crucial part in the upholding of systemic racism, because school is a little system that actually distributes access to wealth, power, education, all these things, because all these things are connected. If you have higher education, you are more likely to have better paying jobs. If you have better paying jobs, it's more likely that you get a higher education. These things are connected. And it's really well established that questions of class are really, that your economic status is really affecting you in the German school system. More than in a lot of other European countries. I think it was, I don't know if it was in 2013 where the OECD, so the OECD, said Germany is the country where your economic status has the highest effect on your educational, on your education. So because we have different levels of education, you have like Hauptschule and Realschule and Gymnasium, so different schools that will that you can attend, that will either give you the opportunity to go to university or not. And if you have, and there are people who have who are from families with lesser income, they're a lot more likely to not attend gymnasium, so schools for higher education. So what is a little bit invisible is which role does race play in this whole thing. And some studies kind of point out that there is a strong case that race and racism actually plays a role. We have there is this thing that there was a test or a study done that teachers graded the paper of a school boy differently, whether he's called Max or Murat, and Murat is a Turkish name. So even though they're exactly the same, they would Murat would have a disadvantage. And then we also have a lot of like interviews from, or people who talk about the experience of not being recommended for the school for gymnasium. And because people said, well, she's not German, he's not German, so he will not be able to keep up and stuff. So there's a lot of strong evidence that there is a lot of prejudice from the teachers, and this is why in elementary school you have in a lot of regions in Germany you have really diverse classes. You have kids of all races in the classroom, and then you go to the higher education and then there are a lot less people of color in the class. This was certainly my experience in my time in school. And I don't know, I made it to gymnasium, but and this is what I mean with these invisible, not really hard to pinpoint dynamics that are at play, because a lot during my time in school, I was increasingly convinced that I am not as intelligent. There's nobody told me this, but I was really under this pressure that every time I was not having the best grade, I thought, okay, this is because I'm stupid. Not this is because, I don't know, I just have to study harder, and then this is, then I'm going to be fine. It was really like, my thoughts were really final. And then for the book, I learned that there's a thing called stereotype threat. And stereotype threat is when you are, for example, member of a racialized group. There's psychology at play that when you fail, you think it's because you are very afraid to become the stereotype. And this is a factor of stress that children of color have to deal with, and Black children have to deal with. But nobody really talks about this in the German school system, or nobody has a sensitivity for it. So this is one factor. The other factor is why did I think I wasn't smart, I wasn't intelligent, is because I didn't see myself in the books we read, in the history we learned. I wasn't part of it. I was invisible. So the school system as such, and what I learned, kind of in the subtext taught me that I am not important. So because when we learn about Black people, we learn it we learn about imperialism and colonialism, but way more in the context of this was a race between the European countries. Like Black people were just like a side story that they were there, but they were taught, like this whole thing was taught more from this economic lens, like how European countries were trying to get rich and by conquering Africa. This is how we learned about it, but we never learned about the Black perspective on history. So I think these two dynamics, like people have biases within teachers, the school system and how it's set up and such, and then also what we learn in school, these things really determine how children of color, how Black children see themselves. And then it's a lot, like, yeah, it's very likely that if you're not aware of these dynamics, there's this internalized, you internalize this message that you do not matter and you are inferior. And this is what happened to me subconsciously. Nobody told me this to my face, but nobody had to. And this is why I was always interested in writing. I was always interested in literature. But after I was done with school, I thought the German language and dealing with the German language is something that I cannot do. This is something that I am not made for. What I am made for is physical activity, sports. This is where I saw Black people, and this is where other people saw me, right? They thought, I was never really interested in sports. I was good at sports. I was naturally good at sports because I'm athletic, but I was never it was never a passion of mine. So, but still, people would say, "Yeah, sports. Yeah, that makes sense." Yeah. So this is why I first pursued sports, and I wasn't really interested. So, and then I made the switch later to journalism, took a leap and made my way, but it took a while. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you're also talking about your experience in school in the US, and how was it different there? I thought it was just so great that you met another Black German girl, and you know, who would have thought? But of course, like, why even count it out, right? And I think that's, you know, that's why our work, you know, and the work of the BGHRA is capturing experiences of Black Germans in the US as well, and like that's an important part. How was that for you? How was school in the US for you, and how important was it to meet another Black girl?
So yeah, I was 16 when I came. It was 2005. And I was going to Central High School in Philadelphia. This is, I think, one of the largest public schools in Philadelphia. It's I read on Wikipedia that is one of the most diverse schools in the whole US. And this is how I felt. Like there were a lot of different people attending this school, which was great for me. But I felt, I think the biggest thing that happened for me in high school in Philadelphia was how it shaped my identity as a Black person. Because I was not the Black girl anymore. I was the German girl, which was a big switch of perspectives, because in Germany, I wasn't the German girl. That was the whole thing, that I wasn't German. And now I was in the US and I was the German one. And since there was another Black German, I met her. She found me because she heard there's this German exchange student and she's also Black, and she couldn't believe it either. So she tried to find me. It was a big school with 2,500 people there. But one day she stood in front of a class I attended and she said, excuse me, are you the German girl? And then I said, yes. And then she said in German, ich bin auch Deutsche. I'm also German. So that was actually wonderful, because I thought, okay, so there are actually two of us. It's great. And a lot of people ask, like, oh, so this is how Germans look like. I didn't know that Germans were like Black. So because this is the only reference they had. So that was actually a very interesting switch of perspectives. But for me, it was this time in the school in Philadelphia. It was very interesting because it was a lot for me to take in, and when I try to remember the educational system, I think what I liked was that you had I liked certain things that were different in high school. So I liked that you had one class every day for a year. I felt it made a lot more sense than having one class over several years, but like, I don't know, on Mondays and Fridays, because I felt like with that type of learning, you would remember it better with like having it for a shorter period of time, but more intensely. But what I noticed, of course, was also even though the school was really diverse, there was also a kind of, like an invisible segregation, kind of like how Black people were sitting together and like white people. Asian people, you know, they all had like this, especially in the cafeteria, you know, I didn't really, it was subconsciously, but I only had Black friends in high school. That was interesting to me, that I was actually, yeah, I can't really tell. Yeah, I think I noticed that race actually matters and how it plays out when you have an option to be friends with Black people, because in Germany, there weren't that many Black people to be friends with in school. So I think it really shaped my Black identity this time in high school, definitely. Yeah.
Interesting. I can relate to a lot of that. Very interesting. Thank you. I'm going to take a few questions from the audience in just a second, because I have one more question for you that I'm just like dying to know. There's this moment that you describe in the book where you go into your sister's room and your sister is a little bit older than you, or one of your sisters is a little bit older than you. You're the middle sister.
Both of them are older, but one of them is older by 4 years and one just 1.5. So yeah.
Yes, that's right. Because your mom said to your grandma, "I'm having my third child, come and help me." And your grandma came to Germany and lived with you until the age of eight, right? So I'm super interested to also know how, was it to have a Black grandmother with you until the age of 8 in Germany. But what I wanted to ask really was that moment in your sister's room where you see the book Farbe showing our colors, the most important book ever. And you are 12, and your sister was given this book by a family friend, if I remember this right. And she didn't read it. She kind of tossed it aside because the context in which it was given to her was, "Oh, you're struggling with identity issues. Here, read this book." And that's sort of how she communicated it to you. And you were like, "I'm not struggling with identity. We're fine, right?" And how, and just, it's like that moment, like where, what would have happened if you would have read the book at 12?
I know, right? I wonder so much what would have happened if I opened up this book and started reading it, because it's crazy that I remember this so vividly, because I remember this book so vividly sitting. I was sitting in her bedroom, and I saw this book, and I saw these women on the cover of the book, and it says Afro-Deutsche, as like women, like it has this term Afro-Deutsch, which I never heard before, and I was like, "What's this?" And it was given to her by a white person who was well-meaning, definitely, but my sister, I have to say, my sister is also naturally a little bit stubborn. So when you tell her to do something, she will probably not do it because you told her to do it. But this was a little bit, this was exactly that. She said, like, I don't know, I don't need to read a book about Blackness in Germany because, I'm fine. I am Black, and like, I don't need this. And I thought, like, we don't need this. Like, I know what it means to be Black in Germany. I mean, I am a Black person in Germany. I don't need to read about it. Which a lot, like some years later, maybe even 10 years later, or even longer, this is when I opened up the book Farbe, because Farbe, for people who don't know, is actually groundbreaking work in Black people defining their identity in Germany. It's published by 3 women, Katharina Oguntoye, Maya Yim, and Dagmar Schulz, and there were Black women contributing texts to discover the history of Black Germans, and they also talk about their identity and how they see themselves. And I think it's so interesting. I read it, I have a copy now, I read it all the time. Like because everything that followed is actually, this book was like the first book and a very important one that was actually doing some version of what I am building on. I was building on with my book, trying to define Black German identity. Yeah, so yeah, and I wonder, probably the same thing happens with my book. Somebody gives it to a Black German kid and says, hey, maybe you want to read this. And they see this book and they're like, why should I read this? This is not, I don't need this. And I can really, I have sympathy for that because I was the same girl. I don't know. Yeah. But I hope they will read it anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and it goes back to that idea of not wanting to be the stereotype, right?
Yeah.
And I was, the very first pages talk about Anton Wilhelm Amo, the Black philosopher in Germany, defending his thesis in 1729 on the rights of Black people in Europe, right? So when you know that, and it's during the Enlightenment, right? And in school, you constantly get told Kant, Hegel, right? And they're sort of on this pedestal, and you don't teach the history of Anton Wilhelm Amo, then I can see how one can grow up not seeing yourself in intellectual discourses if you don't feel you see any of the examples, right? Obviously, also the authors of the book, right? Katharina Oguntoye writing pieces, and part of the book is very historical, right? And this there was one question in the audience, how how a translation of your book, how would that add something to English speakers? And the next comment right after was by Maria Greve, and I'm really happy for this because this is the perfect answer. It's important to publish it in English, she says, because it helps to transform how German is taught in the US. So that's one reason, right? But the other reason is also because there are the Nuras in Central High School, perhaps, the Black German girl that hears about another, they're there, right? So this is just it's so important to translate it.
But I think this is that is actually interesting, because I feel like a lot of people, the reason why it hasn't been translated is because I think a lot of people think, well, the points that I am making in this book is already discussed in the US context. They are discussed already several times, the question of race and identity and also everyday racism, but that it might be relevant also for the US to have a German perspective on these things that are already better established in the US. I think it's also important and adds to the conversation, even though, of course, I know that that in the US, the discourse is already also in the broader population is a lot more. It has evolved a lot faster than it has in Germany, but I still think these things are connected, and my story is part a US story, and I also think, there are Black Germans in the US as well. So we shouldn't forget about them. So yeah, I still hope it's getting translated somehow.
Yeah. There was another question about data collection and like when we can become more specific about the effects of racism in school and in society. And I'm sure you heard of the Afro census as well.
Yeah.
By each one teach one, maybe you even participated. Can you
I
talk
have.
a little bit about like why it is difficult to really make these like systematic changes in school? Like, what do you see is, and I feel like that can totally be connected to like another institution like the media, right? It's sort of like almost hand in hand. What are the blind spots? What really needs to change there? What do you think? Opinion on that?
So there's the Afro census is actually a push for Black initiatives to count Black people in Germany, because to that day, we don't know how many Black people there are in Germany. It's all just an estimate. People think from 500,000 to 2 million, around that part, but it's really an accurate number. And there's no counting of Black people. There's people who are counted who have like an African passport or have parents of African descent. Like you can have that data, but it doesn't say whether they are Black or not. And then there are also people like me. I'm not counted as because people wouldn't. Me being a US citizen, people wouldn't, there's no guessing in the data that I'm Black or not. So so the Afro census is an initiative to actually change that, to find out how many Black people there are in Germany, and how their life looks like. Is it, what kind of discrimination do they face, but also where do they live? And like, I don't know, since when are they in Germany? Do they have a German passport or not? Different aspects of Black life in Germany, because everybody is just kind of guessing around, and the information and the evidence that we have is from people talking about their experiences, and then from these experiences other people connect to it. But we also have with that we have a problem that not everybody these Black initiatives they don't reach all Black people, because I think it's still a problem that the people who know about these Black initiatives, who see themselves represented in them, are often people of higher education or higher income, people who are mainly in bigger cities and stuff. So this is all a problem. When it comes to this initiative, they have a really hard time to connect to all the different Black people, because in Germany we also have it's very different than Black communities in the US, since it's very very diverse within the Black community. There are several different stories and histories connecting the Black community in Germany. There's not like, other than in the US, there's not one main narrative around why there are Black people in the US. Like there's one main reason, and it's the reason of the transatlantic slave trade and the history of enslavement. in Germany, we don't have this one history, that one line that brought Black people to the country. We have several different and more individual stories. So that makes it harder to actually speak about like the Black people in Germany. And all of that needs to be unpacked and researched and told in more detail, but we need data for that. So there's this Black initiative called Each One Teach One, and they actually wanted to collect the data. It was really important to them that they are the ones who collect the data, that they hold the data, and that it's not accessible to other institutions. Yeah, that was an attempt. It wasn't, I think not that many people participated. I think it was around 10,000 people. It's still not over, like people can still, I think they will have another round of counting maybe. And 10,000, you can still do something with that, but I think a lot of people, yeah, but there's still this questions of, yeah, how many are there? How many Black people are there? And this is something that is yet not answered. But I think, of course, it's very controversial, especially in Germany, to collect information about race in Germany, since the history of marking and collecting or naming races in Germany is deeply rooted in NS Germany and Second World War, and people are, or even later data collection and the oppression that follows with it is also connected to to East Germany and stuff. So people are really suspicious and reluctant to share personal data, which, given the history, is very understandable.
Yes, yes. There are several questions, and to all the audience members, I'm trying to sort of summarize and pull a few different questions into like one question that I can give Alice, because there's a lot. But when it comes to school, one comment I'd like to read, and I'm not sure if you have the answer to this, but I think there are also people in the audience who should hear this question. Leslie wrote, as a Black mother with 2 children attending a German school in San Francisco, I have grappled with the naivete or hesitancy that some teachers and staff have displayed when it comes to arming students with anti-racist thinking. Can the author please talk on how some progressive German educators are tackling this issue in their schools? So I was wondering if you, knew any progressive educators in Germany, if you knew any teachers of color, Black teachers in Germany who, are tackling these issues. There was a question from another teacher who's also wondering how to do this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think from my own life in school, I can't really, there were different teachers, of course, there were more progressive teachers and some were not. Actually, I was lucky to have a very progressive English teacher. But since I wrote the book, a lot of teachers reached out to me and a lot of schools reached out to me. So it's there's a lot of discussion and talk going on in the education system. But the problem is that I feel like it's a lot on individual teachers' shoulders. It's on them if the school is deciding to tackle anti-racism, or if they just don't do it. And there are initiatives in Germany. The biggest one is Schule ohne Rassismus, School Without Racism, which is also a a title where you, like, there's no school without racism. This is the problem, but like, you know, this, but this is an initiative where schools can participate in and actually like kind of take this vow that they are aware of racist dynamics. But I also heard from different students or teachers that it's easy to say, yeah, we're a school without racism, but then they don't actually do anything. So we really, I think the biggest problem is that it needs a systemic change. So there needs to be systems like maybe you know, people who come in and can, where teachers or students can go to and talk about discrimination or problematic dynamics that aren't at the school themselves, maybe, because sometimes it's a system that is so, you know, it's really hard to for colleagues to actually talk about race and racism, maybe. So it would be great if there would be somebody from the outside coming in. Since this is not happening, it is the job of the teachers, and they could or can actually make a lot of things better. You can organize, you know, you can organize that people come in and talk about race and racism at your school. You can actually read books on racism or on race. And I think it's really important to also learn about, you know, bias and become aware of biases that you don't want to have, but maybe are internalized. So getting over the thought of good intentions will solve everything. It needs a little bit more than that. It maybe needs systems that keep people in check. It needs systems for that, because sometimes we can control, or sometimes we don't even know that we're acting biased. So this is what I would wish for the educational system. But I think a teacher who is actually who is set on tackling this topic in the school can actually make a big difference. That's my experience, and this is what I hear from students all the time. So yeah.
There was, you know, sticking around with school for I'm not sure how much more time I have. I could sit here forever and talk to you, but somebody in the background, let me know if, okay, thank you. 4 minutes. All right. You know, so there was definitely, there were some comments about, Germany's Holocaust education and the schools putting a lot of focus on that, and that shadowing perhaps Germany's colonialism and genocide.
Oh yeah.
In Africa as well, right? So curriculum changes where colonialism just needs to be a role. I'm happy that you talked about the genocide in your book as well. Just like another reason why an English-speaking audience should reach your book.
Yeah. So of course, what we learn in school is actually it's very important to shape the identity of what is important and what is also German. Yeah. So what we learn in German class and what we learn in history. I think it's very, very important to learn about the Holocaust, and that I think it's really it's important that there's a lot of time spent in school to learn about these things, because they are important. And you see how also anti-Semitism is on the rise in Germany again and stuff. So we need to have, of course, the Holocaust and the NS regime in their curriculum. This is really important. I'm not advocating for the Holocaust not taking that much space. I'm more rather educating on that this is not the only, that the Holocaust shouldn't be told as though there is no before and no after, and that it has nothing to do with anything else in history. I learned about the Holocaust and about the NS regime as though it just popped out of nowhere. But I think to really tell the story about the origins of racist ideas, how that impacted colonialism, imperialism, how that actually was, how racism entered science in the time of Enlightenment, how Kant, for example, played an active role to establish the idea of race in Germany, and all these things led to the, and how Berlin is a crucial place that when we talk about imperialism and colonialism, all these things, they need to be taught in German schools as well, because this is German history as well. And it's also, and I'm not saying these things are like NS regime and colonialism are like rivals fighting for attention. I think it's really important to see the through line of these things as well. So this is what I'm advocating for. And I feel like it's just, if you know about colonialism, imperialism in Germany, also you understand the NS regime way better. So it's actually supporting each other. So these two parts of history. So I think it's important that they are taught this way as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, we're at the end of our time.
No.
I know, and thank you so much. Thank you to you both for this invaluable discussion, especially to you, Ms. Hasters. And
so
although first we're thrilled that we were your first discussion here in the first visit in the United States virtually, we know it's not going to be your last, and we hope to see you again. And I'll ask all of our guests to stay tuned. The video will be made available on our YouTube channel, and also stay tuned for our upcoming events through our social media. And also, as soon as we can get past the pandemic, we hope to host our in-person conference at Rutgers University-Camden that we had to postpone for the pandemic. So thank you to everyone, especially to our sponsors for making this fabulous event possible, and have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Kavina. Thank you, Rosemary Pena, for this wonderful event. Thanks. Thank you to everyone. I enjoyed myself a lot.
Oh, me too. It was an honor. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.